Hi, this is Ron Paulk with Paulk Homes, and the Ultimate Miter Stand plans are finally available. It's taken a while, but I think they're ready for prime time. The PDF plan, which I will email you upon request, is made up of 7 pages. The pages you see here, the cover page, a materials list, and then a cut list for the 1/2-inch plywood, and a cut list for the 3/4 plywood, the hardware, and then a couple of pages of exploded views just to show some more detail. There's a couple of changes to the plan from the prototype that was shown in the YouTube video. The first major change is that the overall length of the main unit is now 6'6". In the original prototype, it's 8 feet. I've used the prototype now for a little over a year, and it is nice having the full 8 feet, but considering everything, I decided that mobility and weight, it would be nice to make it fit in a pickup truck a little bit better and also be a bit lighter. So it can be scaled up to 8 feet fairly simply with basic carpentry skills. But I think that the 6'6" size, which I have yet to build and use myself, so it's more theoretical, but I do believe this is going to be a better unit, an improvement. So this would be the ultimate miter stand. The other change I made to it was to make the height from the base to the top 8 inches. In the prototype, it was 7 inches. And in the original workbench plan, I also made that 8 inches. And in that prototype, it was 9. So I've had the opportunity to work with from 7 to 9. I found 9 was far more than I needed for the Festool clamps to fit in from underneath. And I found that 7 inches was a bit tight, though it still worked. So 8 inches was the sweet spot. And then one note about the length of it being 6'6" versus 8. The cutting capacity remains the same as the 8 foot. The difference being is that more of the cutting capacity has been shifted to the extensions. So the extensions are a bit longer. Overall, from the extensions from end to end of dovetail is 6'4". And again, the overall dimension of the main unit is 6'6". So they'll still both nest very nicely inside of the main unit for transportation. The other change I made is more how it's put together. Just like with the experience I had with the Ultimate Workbench, I unified the parts. So the 4 spreaders that are on the outside, the side spreaders, are all identical. So one can be made carefully with a drill and a skill saw and a jigsaw, a little sanding to create a nice template to create the other 3. And then the end spreaders, again, are all identical, so one can be made and then the other 3 can be made using a router, using the first one as a template. The 2 inside side spreaders have to be modified after they're completed so that the stiffener rails here, which hold the saw up to the proper height, also cut through those 2 inside end spreaders. So you'll need to make marks and cut those away. I show how they're built in the plan, but my recommendation is just to make them all 4 the same and then modify them. It's a little easier. The spreaders themselves, I show a dimension for those. They set into a dado that takes up about 1/4 of an inch, and then the difference above the lower to the upper is the difference for the Capex saw. And that's another note, that this is designed specifically for the Capex saw. So if you want to use it for a Bosch or a Makita or one of the other brands, you'll need to make modifications for how the saw fits and interacts. My recommendation would be to ignore the overall height I show for the spreader and measure the height of your actual miter saw, and then make the spreader so that it is a little bit shorter than you need, and then use some small shims that you can then just pin on, little strips of wood you can pin on to take it to the exact height that can be adjusted in the future. If you make it the exact height or you're a little bit tall, then you end up having to plane it down. And so again, I think it's better to err to making it a bit short and then shim to fit. And the other major change is the Sawhorses themselves. I think you'll find that that in the original plan, in fact, I'll go to the cut page. This doesn't show this isn't the actual, this is a materials list page, but it shows the individual parts. The first gray area here, which represents a 4x8 piece of plywood, represents the 1/2 inch parts, and the other two gray areas represent 2 sheets of 3/4 inch plywood. This gives you an idea of how you might cut the parts. You don't have to do it exactly like this, but I was just trying to be efficient with the material. So the Sawhorses, as I mentioned, are different. In the original, with the prototype, I have these material supports on both the front, the saw side, and the back side. The back side to store excess materials. I didn't use them that much, but what I found is that in the original design, the material supports were a little too narrow to hold 12-inch material. They were 6 inches, and now they're 8. I didn't want to increase the overall width of the Sawhorses and make them cumbersome, so I think this is a more efficient design. We lose the ones on the back. The fronts are longer, but the overall dimension of the Sawhorse remains exactly the same. And just like the end spreaders and the side spreaders, the Sawhorses can be used as a template. If you take your time and make one of these with skill saw, drill, and sander, and a jigsaw, then you can have one that you take a lot of time and make it just right, and then use it as a template to make the other 5. So what you can do then is take your 6 Sawhorses, take 4 of them, and make up a small template with these slots in them, one that'll make 2 slots, and then just clamp it on there and use your router to make these slots, and then simply measure and drill the holes for the 2 for your risers. So a couple of simple carpentry tips to make it simple and uniform. I also created this plan in metric, and to do this, the designed from the start as a imperial design. Most people want it in that size, but there has been some requests for metric. Because metric is 1 to 10 and imperial is 1 to 12, when I tried to create the metric one, it was larger for this A4 layout, and I would have had to basically start from scratch, and that would have taken as much time as building the first set. So the workaround for this was to simply go through the set that was imperial and take a calculator and just manually go through and convert the dimensions to metric. What I did though was I left the numbers exact as they came up on the calculator. I know that this will not be exactly right, so you'll need to use common sense and round the metric dimensions to industry standard. For example, for 3/4 plywood, 19.05 was the exact conversion. Most likely, I would assume, I understand that you round metric to full and half, so it would be 19.5 or 19. In this case, with 3/4, it would be 19. And in the real world, we know that 3/4 inch plywood is actually about 11/16, so it probably closer to 18 millimeter. So you'll just need to use common sense for the hardware and the cuts and the holes you drill, and just make sure that everything matches up. And as a final note, when you're putting this together, just like I recommended with the Ultimate Workbench, is make your cuts, double check all the mating parts, and do a dry fit and make adjustments before you apply glue and then staple it together. I use 1/4 inch by 1.25 inch staples to assemble the unit using lots of glue. Glue is really what holds us together and makes it so strong. You could use, instead of staples, you could use trim head screws, which would take a little more work to pre-drill, but they would, you could get some nice screws and it would look really nice and be probably a little more forgiving for taking it back apart. If you wanted to dry fit it with the screws, make sure everything fits, pull it apart, glue it, and then screw it back together. And in fact, when I build my 6'6" version, I'm most likely going to go that route. So there it is. If you're interested in the plan, you can send me an email at the address shown on the screen, and in the subject line, please put miter stand or UMS or anything to indicate that. And if you do want it in metric, include metric in the subject line. Thanks a lot, and thanks for watching.